paranormal books. There's fiction. There's horror. There's fantasy. There's religious books. C.S. Lewis's books are on there, which I also would highly recommend. Mere Christianity is a good choice. The Great Divorce. And the Screw Tape Letters, which is probably one of the most iconic things C.S. Lewis ever wrote, other than the Chronicles of Narnia. But at any rate, enough promotion. Let's get on with tonight's topic. So tonight we're talking about this. Well, broadly we're talking about the stages of demonic attack. There's an actual strategy to the way that demons invade a person's life, and particularly we're going to be starting that with the concept of what we call grounds.
Yes, demons are very particular about their coffee.
Oh, very.
They have to have freshly ground coffee. So this is very important. Something you never knew about the paranormal before. I'm sorry, there were only so many grounds jokes I was thinking about the topic. I'm like, what the hell kind of joke am I going to make?
Coffee's about the only one.
Coffee is about the only place you can really go with that. If you're in New Jersey, I was thinking I was going to do a joke about grounds for sculpture, but like nobody outside this area would know what the hell I was talking about. There's a place called Grounds for Sculpture, which I always thought was kind of fun.
See, I'm living in New Jersey at the moment. I had no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's in this area, but whatever.
And because of course, I grew up in Pennsylvania. It's like I'm not from New Jersey. Well, I was born here, but
see, there's Grounds for Sculpture. Then there's Grounds for Summoning. Then there's grounds for lawsuits.
And then of course there's ground itself.
Grounds for divorce.
Grounds for divorce. Can I get a divorce from him?
The Great Divorce.
Well, that's the divorce of heaven and hell because
yes.
they got. And if anybody's wondering, they got married in a poem by William Blake called "The Marriage of Heaven and Hell."
Oh, that's interesting. So kind of like an elopement.
Yeah, it's an interesting poem.
It's a common law marriage, Married by a poet. It certainly wasn't a church wedding.
So, at any rate, just to get something resembling on topic. Grounds. Now, one of the common questions I get from the more skeptical side of the universe is, well, if demons are real and they actually possess people, why do they possess random schmoes? Why don't they possess the President of the United States?
Some might say that has happened.
Yes, but usually this question particularly comes up with more popular presidents than the current one.
Yeah.
We're not going there. Just no.
It's too easy.
Yeah, it really
low-hanging fruit.
But the shortest answer, what it sort of alludes to, is how sure are you that they don't? There have certainly been examples in history of people who were demonically or diabolically possessed. The most obvious example being, at least by the end of the war, a large chunk of the Nazi Party, or at least the people in power at the Nazi Party. Nero was probably almost certainly possessed, actually, I would say. Particularly because, fun fact, Nero Caesar, if you add his middle name, which I forget what that is, in Jewish
Drusus.
Is it?
I think, yeah, because his branch of the family was, oh god. See, I knew this stuff like really quickly off the back of my, tip of my tongue before.
Well, the point is that Nero Drusus Caesar in Hebrew, actually in Hebrew numerology is 666.
Right.
Not to mention he was an evil man who killed a lot of Christians.
He was, although I don't know that's evidence that he's, possessed. I mean, if everybody who was an evil
his general
bastard.
Unstable behavior, mass murder would be probably the grounds to think he was possessed.
Well, that or I mean, he was a histrionic narcissist.
Although he, contrary to popular myth, he did not fiddle with while Rome burned. For one thing, the fiddle wasn't invented for hundreds of years.
Now they say the popular story was that he played the lyre, and he sang the downfall of Troy, or the sacking of Troy. Like he recited this epic poem. The fact of the matter is he wasn't actually even in the city at the time. He rushed back.
And organized firefighting
fire
brigades
and stuff. Yeah, he did what he could to be responsible and put it out.
Granted, he used it as a giant excuse to rebuild,
Oh, yeah.
expand his palace, and then persecute the Christians and blame them for the fire.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, no, he was a horrible, horrible person and did things that most people aren't aware of that are worse than what the general consensus of. Yeah, they think about the burning of Rome. They don't know about the, like, hundreds of people he had put to death for the pettiest of reasons, the horrific tortures he inflicted on certain people. Not even like Christians and whatnot, but fellow Roman senators, his wife, his, slaves, all that kind of stuff.
So
terrible guy.
At any rate, I should actually clarify before I get into grounds that there's basically two types of demonic activity.
Now, Caligula.
Oh, good Lord!
The way he would, I would probably put my money on Caligula.
I wouldn't be surprised if they both were, to be honest.
He
with
was.
They were both bastards.
Oh yeah, but Caligula was known to talk to people that weren't, there and have episodes and things. So
that was like Caligula just for naming his horse to the Senate.
Yeah, although that, again, that's one of those things people misunderstand. That was actually a lot of the things he did were calculated efforts to humiliate the Senate.
I'm aware,
and
that's why I actually like it.
Yeah, no, it was kind of a funny thing. It was basically him saying, you jackasses are so useless. My horse could do, as good a job as you can. And I'm going to make you sit here and take it and smile.
So, to get back on topic.
Yeah. Sorry, I could talk about Rome and Caligula and all that.
There are, again, broadly two categories. Well, there's more, but there's two broad categories of demonic activity in the world. There's what's known as ordinary demonic activity and extraordinary demonic activity. Now, most of the rest of the show is going to be dedicated to extraordinary demonic activity. That's the possessions and oppressions and infestations, and that's what they make horror movies out of.
And that's the more interesting stuff, generally.
Ordinary demonic activity. How do I explain it? The way I always look at it is, almost all of us have this experience of that little voice in your head telling you to do the right thing. Really, you don't have a conscience? Okay, Brian's a sociopath.
Yeah.
So, okay, normal people, generally speaking, have a conscience. They have that little voice deep down that says, you know that this is wrong, don't do it. We could get into the metaphysics of it, but Christians in general and religious people in general really have long thought that was the voice of the divine, the voice of your guardian angels. On the other hand, there's that other voice that every once in a while, go ahead, nobody will notice, take the money out of the register. Go ahead, do the thing you shouldn't do.
The classic little devil on
exactly.
On the left shoulder.
Demons spend, there is demonic influence in the sense of temptation, of trying to get you to do the wrong thing. Not all, and this is a mistake a lot of Christians make. Not all temptation is inherently demonic. Actually, most of it isn't. We're tempted by demons. We're tempted by the world. We're tempted by our own physical nature and carnality. There's an interesting concept in Mere Christianity where he's talking about the various things that make people do evil things. And one of the comments he makes that I've seen it before from other philosophers, but I like, is that evil isn't, for the most part, evil is not its own thing. It's a twisting of something good. Sexual desire is not evil. If there was no sexual desire, the species dies out. Yeah. You corrupt it, you twist it, and you get lost.
Well, the classic 7 deadly sins are usually exaggerations of the cardinal virtues. So
exactly.
There's usually a correlation.
Evil is not its own thing. It's a corruption of a virtue. The one thing he notes of all of the, particularly speaking of all the deadly sins, the one he sees is coming directly from hell is pride. Because unjustified pride, and this is a common mistake, again, people make, particularly when they're criticizing the idea of the 7 deadly sins. There's a legitimate form of pride in what you've accomplished. And then there's actual arrogance, the pride that it means, which is more of arrogance and pompousness.
Hubris.
And hubris. Which is, you considered, as my fiancée Misha likes to say, the father of sin, partly because it was Lucifer's original sin, partly just because so much comes out of it, and it's the hardest of the seven deadly sins to fight against.
Yeah. Well,
Because the very nature of it, oh look, I have defeated my pride.
Yeah.
And you've just defeated the concept of defeating your pride.
Well, it's also a very fine line. It's like it's very hard to know where justifiable sort of belief and confidence in yourself and your own ability ends, and where does it start to edge into arrogance or overconfidence or pride. You know, you have one, you know, you think, no, I'm still well within, you know, normal justifiable pride. Other people outside of you see, oh no, he's
gotten off the deep end.
He's arrogant. He's you know, gone too far. You know, so it's always a matter of kind of subjective.
And Catholics in particular, and related denominations, and I agree with them on this, tend to think that when the Bible talks about submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. And by the way, that's a common misquote. People often say, resist the devil and he will flee. No. Submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. So it's a little more than that. They're talking about ordinary demonic activity. It's temptation that you could just go, nope, not having that. Get out. The extraordinary is where more complicated things like exorcisms and blessings get in. But certainly anyone can pray for that basic deliverance. So now that we've covered in more detail than was probably necessary ordinary, let's talk about extraordinary. Now, demons are blocked from entering our world for the most part, which is a good thing. To quote the late Ed Warren, if demons had free reign, we'd all be dead. To quote the Bible, the devil comes not but to steal, kill, and destroy. They're not here to do us any favors. They need to be given permission to enter our world, and that mostly comes from us, and mostly comes through one of two ways. The two ways are most often expressed as laws: the law of attraction and the law of invitation. The law of invitation is the simplest to understand. If you ask for demons, you get demons.
Mm-hmm. Just like Archer.
Yeah.
The classic Archer meme.
This is why people who practice satanic ritual get demons. Even so often, even when they're doing it in jest, it's like, no, if you're trying to summon a demon, you may get a demon even if you didn't need it.
Yeah. See, this is where I actually think that the idea of the vampire needing to be invited into a home before entering, I think it was sort of a carryover that Stoker incorporated that from a general idea about demons and the devil.
I believe he's right. That you're right. That it basically,
because most of the folklore I've read never had anything about vampires actually needing to be invited in. Usually, they just, if it was their house, they came right in. But it's the nature of
spiritual evil, and it needs permission.
So,
most invitations are very straightforward. Some of it's a little more subtle. Ouija boards are a very common form of invitation. And before anyone accuses me of it, no, the majority of Ouija board uses are not contacting the devil. The majority of them are you're pushing it yourself, or one of your friends is pushing it. You're just not consciously aware of it. But it does open a risk. The other way, which is a little harder to wrap your head around sometimes, is attraction. Although to me it makes sense. Evil people draw evil spirits by nature of being evil. You see this, for example, when we talk about Adolf Hitler. Now, lots of members of the Nazi Party, most notably, of course, Heinrich Himmler himself, were big into the occult. So
he was the most sort of occult crazy.
Not the only one. There
no,
were
not
others,
the only.
But
I say he was the
most prominent.
He was the one primarily responsible for bringing a lot of that into the larger Nazi Party. Hitler
made fun of him for it.
Well, yeah, he used it for political tool. Most of the other high-ranking Nazis, laughed it off. Himmler was the guy that kind of believed in a lot of that stuff and thought that it would actually give them otherworldly power.
And incorporated a lot of the rituals into the SS.
Yeah.
And some of the crazier occult experiments and things of that nature.
And if you're a fan of Raiders of the Lost Ark, the line, them going around looking for artifacts, that did actually happen.
We need to do an episode about that group.
Yeah, and it was largely from Himmler that
although Hitler had more of an interest in that, specifically because he saw value in the symbolism.
Oh yeah, if it was successful, it was
Yeah.
fine. But Himmler was the one that really pushed it as
True.
far as sending the teams out and telling them where to look and what to look for.
But the most famous of those examples, Hitler was interested in finding the Spear of
Oh yeah.
Destiny, and you could get into a whole lot of occult explanations for it. But the simplest explanation might very well have been, it was a political symbol. It was, I have this thing. This gives me the right to rule. It,
Oh, yeah. And it would have scared the hell out of a lot of
Yeah,
people
oh, yeah.
anyway. But yeah, now see there was sort of they missed the chance there. That was the perfect like fourth Indiana Jones movie, and
They did a novel or something based on a video game.
They did a video game where
Yeah.
they used that idea. They also did Atlantis and whatnot, but it really
And they've
should have
done
been a
at
movie.
least 50 billion other things that have used the spear.
Yeah.
At this point, it's an overused trope.
Yeah, but it would have been a good movie.
Yeah. Maybe with the reboot.
Yeah.
Because apparently they're working on one.
Oh boy.
But the point remains, Hitler himself was a dyed-in-the-wool materialist. He was very dismissive of anything paranormal or occult. There's a considerable amount of debate, which is definitely an episode into itself, and maybe the next episode, because we need to finally go there, about what Hitler's religious beliefs were. But the
Just
thing
the whole thing
is,
about Nazis.
Hitler ran or helped organize and perpetuate the mass murder of between 9 and 12 million people.
Mm-hmm.
When you commit an act like that, there's a spiritual consequence. And that spiritual consequence can be demonic possession. This is what the idea of attraction is. If you do something really horrible as a form of punishment, you get demons. Serial killers, rapists, necrophiliacs, and let's be clear, you'll find a lot of Christians who will tell you homosexuals are demon possessed. People who play too many video games are demon possessed. People who eat too much junk food are demon possessed. No. Every legitimate example of attraction I'm aware of, there are undoubtedly ones I'm not, but every one I'm aware of has been an incredibly extreme case.
Yeah, I would imagine that's got to be like the lowest,
Yeah.
most like lazy freaking demon, the one that makes you eat junk food. It's like, oh, okay, hold a gun to my head. Jeez, all right, fine, freaking Snickers bar. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like
Best demon ever. It's like
most of
just
the time
nuts.
it's like murder, people who've committed multiple, serial killers in general very frequently. And if you do a little research, and we talked about it on the show before, but Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer,
See, I still
David.
I disagree with you on Bundy. Dahmer and Berkowitz, I could see because
Berkowitz is undeniable. He's spoken very publicly
Yeah.
about it. Dahmer, Bundy, there's definitely evidence of his interest in the occult.
See, I haven't. I read like 6 books on Bundy.
So have I.
and
and
I did not come across any of that. I'm still waiting to see where this material is.
Berkowitz, Richard Ramirez, Adolfo
Yes.
de Jesus Constanzo.
There was
Possibly,
one guy,
depending on theories, Jack the Ripper himself.
There's a few that I wouldn't really argue with
Manson.
you on. Manson,
Not
definitely,
technically a serial killer, but there's no denying the occult.
but as far as
Mhm.
as far as a guy that could you just talk people into doing almost anything, I wouldn't fight you too hard on Manson.
I don't think anybody would fight
Yeah,
me
it's
too hard on
like-
Manson.
It's pretty easy to imagine that he could definitely be that guy.
But there are a couple of other examples. The most common one doesn't fit in the first two categories, and by far the most unfortunate is once one of these things has happened, the land upon which it has happened, particularly the more serious pretty much anything in attraction, anywhere that a serious level of satanic activity has taken place, the land becomes cursed, and the next person to move there winds up inheriting the problems of the people before them. The Amityville Horror, this is what happened. The case The Conjuring is based on, at least assuming the movie's correct. I know the movie took liberties. I haven't read the books and whatnot, but based on the movie, that's what happened. People didn't do anything wrong. They sometimes life sucks.
Yeah.
Also, along the lines of people who didn't do anything wrong, people who tick off the wrong person and wind up being cursed, like the case I recently had. Depending on can often wind up with demons, which are what take out the curse. Megan Halverson from the chat said, "How about the Golden State Killer?" I don't know anything about them, to be honest.
By that name, it sounds vaguely familiar, but
we'll have to look in. We'll look into it and get back to you. Sorry about that.
There are so many killers that a lot of them they run together, and it's hard to remember. I saw a special on one guy that definitely seemed to fit the profile, and I can't remember his name now, but he was a freak.
The last and by far the rarest, and this is maybe once or twice in a generation, is what they call soul victims. People of extreme piety, often saints, sometimes because of their piety draw demonic spirits to them. If the case is legitimate, and there's an enormous amount of question to that, this would be what was happening with Annalise Michel, who was the basis for the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Probably the most famous clear-cut case was Padre Pio, who has since been canonized by the Roman Catholic Church, who was under regular demonic attack. You'll note, has since been canonized. He's been turned into a saint, if you don't know what canonized means. It's rare. Most of the people involved were, in fact, saints or are candidates for becoming saints.
Now, given how that was one question that I have that maybe other people do, given what you've said before about how the demons and whatnot react to faith and to religious, icons and stuff, how could they stand to get that close to somebody that was that pious and whatnot and to do that? I mean,
they can, but it's it's partly that God kind of gives them permission, specifically because when you're dealing with someone of that exceptional level of faith, it's seen as a form of test, and partly I think it's they're whatever hell is, and that's an interesting question in and of itself. It's for demons, it's a place of torment. It's a place of unspeakable pain. They're used to suffering. Exorcisms are excruciatingly painful for them, but they hold out, they dig in. That's kind of the other thing is sometimes it hurts every moment of them doing it is unbearable agony to them, but they're petty, they're vindictive, and they're fanatics who are quite willing to just put up with it to get what they want.
Okay.
So we're at the half-hour mark, so I do actually want to give out the phone number. Now that we've from here, we're actually going to get into once you have a demon, what happens next. But in case anybody has any questions, the number is 609-807-2492, 609-807-2492. If you're outside of the U.S. or you're just too shy to call, I am monitoring both the chat on Facebook and on YouTube, so feel free to ask a question there. I will try to get to it. Call in and say hello. Don't be shy. We got Brian shots last week, so it's okay if you bite too.
Yeah.
And I usually don't bite.
Now on to the care and feeding of demons.
So once you've got a demon, however you've got one, and here's another thing to realize about all this: there's a lag. There can be a lag time between when it gets its invitation and when it actually shows up. The way that the way that spirits perceive time is different than the way that people perceive time. You might play with a Ouija board when you're a kid, and then you have problems 10 years down the road. Or it may happen the next day, or right away, or it's up to them. It's up to their time. They're usually looking for vulnerability. But what it'll move into what the first stage, which is known as infestation. Infestation is a haunting on crack. It will do a lot of the haunting type of things: footsteps, seeing figures, bad smells. Objects will disappear. Objects will move. There's differences.
It's like having a really obnoxious house guest
that wants to kill you.
It just won't leave. I'm just saying that part of it. It's like things disappearing, smelling bad, footsteps. Yeah, it's like a really
with a
annoying
ghost
house guest.
But the ghost things don't usually disappear entirely. They move, or they'll disappear for a week, and then you'll find them somewhere. That you'll lose your wedding ring, and then all of a sudden you'll find it sitting on the kitchen counter in plain sight. Where how the hell did you miss it for the last week? And nobody else found it. Whereas with demons, it's gone and it's never coming back. Things like that will happen. Things will get broken. Ghosts usually will break inconsequential stuff. Demons will specifically break things of personal value. Smells of feces, smells of urine, smells of blood. Any of those objects and stranger things appearing, dripping down the walls out of nowhere. Even stranger things than that. There's, I've read about cases where V8 juice dripped down the walls, which sounds completely ridiculous until you realize the father of the family whose house this was happening in had a severe anaphylactic shock level allergy to tomatoes and tomato products. Beer has happened a few times. Weird, greenish sludge that isn't quite so identifiable. All sorts of bizarre things. And the sounds will be growling, voices, things of that nature. The voices will usually be very threatening. Words can appear on thing, often written backwards, left to right instead of right to left. That are usually blasphemies, obscenities, things of that nature. Often they're written in English. Sometimes they're written in Aramaic or Hebrew or some other language that the person doesn't know, and things of that nature. At this point, the main goal is to terrorize people. Demons seem to feed on fear. Whether they feed on fear the way that we feed on food, we don't know. But they certainly use energy from fear to do more things. So you get into this spiral. So with a ghost, it usually wants attention. So if it makes your keys dangle across the room by an invisible hand, and you start freaking out, it stops because it got the attention. Where a demon escalates things. It's like, okay, I got the attention. Now here's what we're gonna do next. At any rate, all during this time, it's trying to drive wedges between the members of the family, trying to get them angry with each other, trying to get them to stop talking to each other. Very, very often, whenever possible, it's trying to get them to, trying to get them to think the other people are crazy. For example, it becomes very common that you'll see cases where one person will have an experience, but everyone else around them doesn't see. 6 people in a room, one person sees something, nobody else sees it. And that by itself, it's called, that could be called delusional.
Yeah.
Sometimes, that happens, and then it happens to somebody else and somebody else at different times. And you can, once you start video recording things, and it's a little hard. You can't video record a delusion, at least so far as I know. So, again, there's ways to tell, but it's picking somebody out. It's usually somebody it sees as vulnerable, and I hate to say it because it sounds slightly sexist, and it's not. But to be honest, very common targets for this are women, for a couple of reasons. One is that women are for genetics or society are often more open than men, which makes them more ready targets. It's generally, but also more fundamentally than that, historically, although this is obviously changing, the idea of the stay-at-home mom is a pretty ingrained part of our culture. Dads go out and work. So you have somebody who's staying alone in the house for long periods of time. It makes an easy target. It gives that demon one person to work on who's isolated, and anyone who knows the basics of fear, even in the way horror movies or novels treat it, things are scarier when you're by yourself.
Yeah. Well, and like you were saying with the social climate in the past, women are also less, would be less credible in most cases.
Bingo.
For a longer period of time.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And it's going to start to isolate that person further and further. And you get also what you see in the ordinary case, but in more extreme version, where it's going to start to try to influence that person to do things, to do what it wants. This is the stage most people confuse with demonic possession. Demonic possession is incredibly rare. This is known sometimes as obsession or sometimes as oppression. there's some technical differences between one and the other, but for the most part, it's the same thing, and it's one person who's becoming increasingly influenced by the spirit. And it's the psychology involved is very similar to addiction. It's very similar to Stockholm syndrome, of it's just torturing the hell out of somebody to get the person to do what it wants. To the point that any phenomenon that happens centers around the person, which can also feed back into trying to destroy the person's credibility. Because it only happens when Sally's around. Sally's playing a prank.
Mm-hmm.
And that's again how insidious this type of thing gets. But eventually it's going to ask the big question. And the big question is where you go from this point into actual true possession, which is it's going to ask for permission to enter the person's body. For actual possession to occur, it needs permission. It needs the person to actually consent. It needs an act of will, to put it in magical terms. And at that point, the demon is now inside of that person's body, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This is also why possession is so rare, because most people don't agree. It's also why that previous stage, it's so important to try to get a person help before they reach this point, because it's much easier to get rid of a demon that hasn't taken up habitation in somebody's body. Because everything before this, house blessings often work, exorcisms of homes often work. Once you've crossed this line, you need an actual exorcism of person, and that's incredibly dangerous for the person. It's incredibly dangerous for the exorcist. People often ask, why doesn't the demon just kill the person? Why doesn't the demon just kill the exorcist? It's happened. Often, no medical examiner, I think, in modern history is going to put demon possession as cause of death. Heart attacks, strokes, anything else, dehydration. Here's the thing about the Annalise Michel case. Now, she stopped eating, and ultimately the priests involved and her parents were charged with neglect. The priests claim, and I don't know for certain how true this is or not, is that no, they were actively trying to get her to eat. And if a priest is following the actual rules of the ritual in the Catholic Church and most other legitimate denominations, yes, there is fasting as part of the ritual. The priest is the one who does the fasting, not the possessed person. The possessed person's under enough stress.
Yeah, they need energy.
Yeah. So, ideally, in fact, in most cases, or at least many modern cases where the Catholic Church is involved, they try to have a medical doctor on hand to monitor and everything. Because again, the idea here is not to kill the person.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the last stage, which is what the ultimate point of all of this is. Which is, it wants to destroy the person. When it can, it'll push them into suicide. It'll push them into murder. If it can't do that, it'll try and push them to the point that everybody thinks they're crazy and they're locked in a mental hospital. If you talk, and I've done this, if you talk to people who work in long-term mental health facilities, especially with criminally insane or people that are particularly violent, almost everyone I've talked to, there's a few exceptions, but almost all of them have at least one case they've worked on that doesn't make any sense from a scientific standpoint. The person knew things they shouldn't know. Objects moved. There was just something about this person that didn't make any bloody sense. And I'm not, the vast majority of mentally ill people, the vast majority of people in mental hospitals are mentally ill. It is a very dangerous mistake that gets made far too often to confuse mental illness with demonic possession. And see our last week's show, in fact, where yes, we got into telling the difference, but it will try to do that. And if you look, there are studies that have been done showing, there's a certain commonality of people who've used Ouija boards winding up in psych hospitals. and things of that nature. And here's one of the great secrets the psychiatric community doesn't necessarily want to get out. More and more people in the psychiatric community are becoming aware of this. There's, and are bringing clergy in quietly. Usually, I've interacted with a couple of these cases over the years where it's like, okay, we can't do anything. The medication isn't working. Stuff's happening we can't explain. Eventually, if you're maybe not the hardcore skeptic scientist, but especially if you're a doctor and your ultimate goal is to treat somebody and to help somebody, and everything you can do doesn't work, you start to think, well, what haven't we tried yet? And there have been cases, and again, it's rare, it's not common. But again, the thing about demonic activity, and it's another way to tying this episode back into the previous one, which was my intention, is there's a strategy to what's going on. Everything is going towards a specific purpose. That's what separates it from hauntings. Hauntings are usually random and fairly chaotic. Now, another, related to this, how does this relate to other types of spirit phenomenons? There comes a point, as I've said before on the show, I believe, at some point, sometimes it doesn't matter. I'm a very practical kind of guy, because people will ask me, well, how do you know if it's a demon and not a djinn or a fairy or this or that or who knows what? It's like, I don't really care. Why does it matter? If the person's life is in ruins, why does it matter what the spirit calls itself? You need to deal with the problem. I want to give out the number again. We're coming up on the end of the show. There is certainly always more to say, but in case anybody would like to call in, 609-807-2492, 609-807-2492.
Yes, please call in.
Call in, ask questions.
We want to hear somebody other than ourselves.
Yes. Meanwhile, I'll give you some suggestions. For anyone who's interested in these topics, I'll give you guys some suggested readings. There's a good book called Glimpses of the Devil, which is actually written by a psychiatrist. I forget the guy's name. I want to say something or other Pack. I'm probably wrong. But it's about cases of demonic possession that he's personally been involved with as a psychiatrist. There is a book. The Warrens' books are particularly good. I would highly recommend Demonologist. And thankfully, since they're all in print again, there's a very good book called In a Dark Place about the Snedeker haunting. This haunting was also the basis of the very bad movie The Haunting in Connecticut. But the very good TV episode, A Haunting in Connecticut, which was the very first episode of the TV series A Haunting.
Okay. Not familiar with the show, but
it's a combination of documentary with the original people involved in hauntings and reenactments.
Okay, so like docudrama, I think they call them.
I always thought docudramas were more fictional, more on the fiction. It's like just more of the reenacting, where this is almost a 50-50 split.
I think anything like that qualifies if it's got reenactments, but it's of a fact-based nature. They kind of start calling it a docudrama.
But if you want a good rundown of the progression I'm talking about here, the In a Dark Place case is very textbook. And that's available on Amazon. I don't know if it's available on Audible. I should check.
Yeah. Be good to know. Read by someone with a very spooky voice.
Well, one would hope. Otherwise, what's the fun? And I don't see an easy way to search Audible, unfortunately, without logging in.
It could be fun in a whole different way to take a really scary book and have it read,
like by Pee Wee Herman,
by Paul Rubens or something,
Well, he's capable of doing more than the.
No, I know.
Ergo,
he's actually
specifically,
actor,
it would need to be Pee Wee
Herman. Yeah. It was like, and then the ghost jumped out and said, "Boo!" Just a whole subcategory of like books that are deliberately like going against the subject matter. That would be really funny.
The Amityville Horror is another good one, actually. Granted, it is probably the single most controversial haunted house in American history.
It's probably been somewhat over.
It's been hyped. It's been
Overhyped
the
and-
books, and especially especially the movies, but the books themselves were drama. They're not entirely accurate because here's the thing to realize about all of the books in this genre, even the non-fiction books. Books are written to make money, not to accurately report on facts. That's theoretically that's newspapers, but the reality is newspapers are also intended to make money.
Yeah, pretty much. They have to sell copies, so you're always going to print the most sensational version of the story.
So reality is, things got exaggerated. Some of the things that got exaggerated have been deliberately or otherwise misrepresentative. For example, there's a famous example of how the car the priest's driving at one point, the hood flips up and blocks his view, and the model of car that he was driving, that isn't possible. So supposedly in the first edition and the early editions, it was a model that was impossible. In the later editions, they changed the model to one where it worked.
Right.
Yeah, the people saying that got it backwards. The original model in the editions, yes, it was totally possible. Then later editions screwed up and changed the model to one that couldn't happen.
Yeah.
If you're interested in Amityville, you can go onto YouTube and look up Amityville Horror Week. You can find a whole week of Lou Gentili and myself interviewing George Lutz, Kathy Lutz, Chris Lutz, Lorraine Warren, and quite a few of the other prominent people in that case. You know, don't take my word for it. Don't take Jane Anson, the author of the book's word for it. Read what happened from the people it happened. You know, hear what the people it happened to talk about it. There's a good documentary that used to be on Netflix. I don't think it is anymore, but you can still find it, I'm sure, called My Amityville Horror, which is created by Danny Lutz, one of the other the other three kids. So Chris Lutz we had, Dan Lutz is one of the other two, and Danny talks about his experiences in the house. Yeah. There's a common myth that I've heard repeated many times that the family's come out and admitted that it was a hoax. They really haven't.
Yeah.
The only person directly related to the case, actually directly related to the case, that has said that it wasn't true was Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., the pathological liar and convicted 6-time murderer.
Yeah.
Who can only comment on what happened to himself because he was in prison by the time the Lutzes moved in.
Yeah, he kind of was not there.
Yeah. Certainly there's the question of his own supposedly paranormal experiences. Specifically, the story goes that he was a black figure, handed him the rifle, and then followed him as he traveled throughout the house, murdering his family.
See, now there's somebody that you could explore whether he was like demonically.
Yeah, except given
possessed.
he's a pathological liar, it's impossible to know.
Oh, it's impossible, but it'd be interesting to see if there was any
I lean towards yes.
outside evidence that might point, like,
Either
aside from his own testimony.
At this point, there's so many contradictory things. It's because there's talk of him having been involved in Satanism and witchcraft and all these other things.
Yeah.
Drug use, family connections to the mafia. We could go on all week about all of the rumors and speculation about what actually happened. I will say that the preponderance of the evidence definitely says that despite his own constant changing of his story, that he committed all 6 murders within quick succession of each other, starting around 3:15 in the morning. Here's what's interesting, though, about those murders, and why I do think that he was under demonic influence when it happened. Now, the nearest house to 112 Ocean Avenue at the time was about 30 feet away. The man who lived there at the time was sitting in his kitchen with his windows open having a cup of coffee. Now, DeFeo used a Marlin 316 rifle, which is a high-powered, very loud rifle that doesn't carry a silencer. 30 feet away, windows open, the only thing the man heard was a dog barking. Mom and Dad were shot in the back of the head, lying face down, side by side, in bed. There's no sign either of them even woke up. There's no sign the kids woke up. There's no sign they were drugged. There's no sign they were bound. Why didn't somebody wake up? Why didn't any of the neighbors hear the shots? There's a rumor. There's a woman who lived in the area that has since come forward and said, "Oh well, I heard the shots," but yeah, she's saying, "Yeah, I heard the shots. I was just too afraid to tell anybody." The murders took place in the 70s. Why did you wait 20 years to tell somebody?
Yeah. And that could be wishful thinking. We all know how unreliable memory is.
Here's the other thing about Amityville. And the original, so the very first, the man who most spread the story that was a hoax was Stephen Kaplan, the father of vampirology, according to him. The guy was a screwball. He was convinced that vampires had secretly infiltrated the U.S. government.
Well, that part's true. You can read my books and learn more about that. That was a perfect opening. I mean,
yeah, it really is.
That was like I had to take that.
But actually, the story started with a reporter. For pretty much the biggest newspaper on Long Island at the time. I forget the newspaper off the top of my head. But the thing is, the reporter who first wrote the story saying it was a hoax, it didn't happen, was the son of the chief of police for Amityville. Now, the problem that they had then, and this has been even more serious problem in the time since, was the story had gotten out, it was in the news, and the minute you say something's haunted, even back in the 70s, if you haunt it, they will come.
Oh, yeah, tourism.
So the town has this huge problem of mostly teenagers turning up, yanking boards off of the house, trying to get weird souvenirs, trying to break in, vandalizing the other properties in the area.
Yeah.
So the cops have a vested interest in saying, it's a hoax, the house isn't haunted, go home.
Yeah.
And this happens a lot with hauntings, that the local police will in fact say nothing happened.
Yeah. Well, because also it's just kind of an awkward situation. The police usually aren't in a position where they can't come out and say, yes, we believe this was haunted.
Yeah.
Because that's just not something that's going to make any police force be taken seriously. So they pretty much have to fall on the side of, none of this stuff is true. It's, it can't be real. Because then it's like, okay, where does the jurisdiction of the police end in regards to supernatural, crimes and occurrences?
Well, now this just makes me think of the friend of the show, Patrick Thomas's series about the Department of Mystic Affairs, which is a federal government department that handles the paranormal. One of the things I like about it,
the X-Files, you need a group that specifically
has
jurisdiction.
What I love about the DMA stories is the official position of the DMA is we don't use cover stories. Whenever the media, when the press, anyone asks them what happened, they tell them exactly what happened. Which is, it works as a great cover story because the reality is the only newspapers that will ever print it are the tabloids that nobody believes anyway.
Right.
But it's actually because the head of the DMA is Uncle Sam himself, and Uncle Sam believes in honesty and, transparency in government. So he just tells them, it's like, no, our official policy is to tell the truth.
Yep. I still need to read those. They sound actually really good.
So we're coming up on the end of the show. I do want to, again, remind everybody that this show and pretty much every other one from here on out, so get used to the ads, is brought to you by Audible. Remember, audibletrial.com/paranormal-e. audibletrial.com/paranormal-e. E is an encyclopedia, or elephant, or echo, or however you want to put it.
It just seemed like you're using elephant.
Or maybe we should go E as in ectoplasm.
E as in ectoplasm. That's another good one. I'm like, at least tie it in.
Somehow. Go check it out. Get a free 1 month trial. If you don't like it, just cancel it.
Yes.
And here's the beauty of it, because I've had a membership and canceled it for years, and then we recently brought it up again because my fiance and I both work jobs where we have to sit in cars all bloody day, and it's nice to have a free audiobook to listen to. Is those books I got back before, including the one I got with my original free trial, I can still get them even though I had canceled it for like 3 years.
Yeah,
still available.
They saved them on your account.
Yep, and you can download them on your phone and tablets and all those other happy things. And again, it's a free month trial. It's a free book. If you hate the service, take the free one and never use it again.
Exactly. You
can support us by doing that. Of course, you can always support us by going to patreon.com/ Demonology. Patreon.com/demonology. If you want to throw us a little bit of money. If you're broke and audiobooks aren't your thing, or if you already have an Audible account, the most basic way you can always support us is go to youtube.com/c/paranormal encyclopedia and subscribe. Like, comment, share.
Yes.
That by itself does us an enormous amount of good. Remember, youtube.com/c/paranormal encyclopedia, or just look up Paranormal Encyclopedia on YouTube. It's also worth checking out. There's a great website nowadays called Breach.tv. All our videos go up there. In fact, they're about to implement being able to do live videos there the way you can do them on YouTube. I will say this now, while this show will continue to go up on YouTube Live, I'm going to be doing additional videos for Breach, and when I do them, when I do live ones that aren't the show, they're going to go on Breach first, and then eventually I'll get around to putting them on YouTube.
Me too, maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a bunch of other people.
I'm looking at doing videos. I'm just lazy.
Yeah, we're trying to light a fire under his rear end.
Yeah.
Amisha and Beth are working on some videos as well. If any content creators out there are listening to us, I definitely recommend checking them out. The ad revenue is much better than YouTube, and quite honestly, all of the nonsense you get from YouTube about unjustified copyright strikes and things of that nature, they're not going to give you as much trouble. Obviously, you're not going to just upload copyrighted material willy-nilly, but if it's like, they're actually going to give you more of a hearing about fair use.
All right.
But, yeah, and 2 minutes to spare. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, if anybody is local, this weekend I'm going to be doing my presentation on vampires in literature, folklore, and film at the COGS Expo up in Parsippany, which is going to be a lot of fun. I'm also doing a reading.
It's free, I believe.
Yeah, it's free for everyone, so you just go in and enjoy all the stuff, all the vendors, all of the cool things, good stuff there. Yeah, and I'm going to be doing a reading from one of my books as well later in the evening on Saturday.
I unfortunately will not be there. I have to work Saturday and Sunday, in fact. But I definitely do recommend checking out. Next month there is Catskill Steampunk coming up.
Yeah.
Which is going to be the 8th through the 10th.
Yeah, I can't make that.
I actually will. I'm sorting out details now, but I am in fact going to be there. I'm going to be tentatively, it looks like I'm going to do a magic act, a Q&A with another paranormal group, maybe talk about the history of the spiritualist movement, and the one I'm particularly looking forward to, so there's going to be a bonfire. I'm going to do some ghost stories in front of the bonfire. It's very economical in terms of the price, and especially because the price is for the entire weekend, including your hotel room, unless that's changed from the previous years, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't. I looked into all that. I definitely recommend checking it out. They always have some great people, and you come see me, come see Brian this weekend. It's, again, if you live anywhere near Parsippany, New Jersey, it's free.
Yeah, it's the Radisson in Parsippany.
Just show up and go see what's going on. If you hate it, well, you didn't lose any money on the deal.
Yeah, there's music, there's performers, there's vendors, there's all kinds of cool stuff.
Yep, but that's going to do it for tonight. I want to thank everybody for listening. This is Kevin Mears saying good night and God bless.
And Brian McKinley, godfather of vampire thrillers, saying stay thirsty. Steal a line from
why
beer
not?
commercial. Why not? Eventually I'll get a tagline.
No, I think stay thirsty works.